you'll see the slides as they go, and we'll just make sure that you're seeing that. We'll just check in with John there as we kind of go through the slides. And I have some fun things for you, Rachel, so I hope you're ready for what I got in store.
All right.
Yeah. So with that, we're gonna hit record. John, are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. This is Steve Cady with our Nexus Fireside Chat. And the title today is The Art and Experience of Graphic Facilitation. And we're here with Rachel Smith from Grove Consultants International. And in our chat room, we have John Spalding. Say hi, John.
Hi, John.
And Rebecca. Say hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca.
So thanks for doing that. We're going to be doing kind of a creative exploration with Rachel, as well as we'll be graphically recording live. Screens can be switched around. We'll get to see stuff, and we'll kind of see where we go. We've got our star for the day, and that's Rachel Smith. Rachel, you're our star.
Oh, wow. Thanks.
A lot of pressure. And Rachel, I love you. I think you're an awesome, fun, just a great person to know, and I'm so glad that you're spending time with us today. There's a lot of people that are here today from around the world, from our Massive Organization Development Program, that are in our classes, people that are interested in everything from graphic facilitation and recording all the way to facilitating change, to leading change, and all kinds of things. So we've got a cool group of people that have come around this virtual campfire. And so as you think about the virtual campfire, for you, Rachel, what comes to mind when you think of us gathering around a virtual campfire with you?
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me around the virtual campfire here with you. I'm really excited and thrilled to hear that we have so many people with so many different interests. And I like to kind of picture us hovering in space with the campfire in the center and an expanding circle that's as big as it needs to be so that we can all sit around it.
Great. And John, how are you doing with the images? We got a slide for that, and then I'll just kind of cue you on the next one when I go to the next topic. Are you doing okay there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So we're seeing a campfire now.
Nice.
So, Rachel, let's jump into our conversation. What does it mean it's more complicated than that when I think of the idea of graphic facilitation? What's that mean to you?
What does it's more complicated than that mean?
Yes. When we think, what's graphic facilitation? It's just graphic facilitation.
Yeah. It's way more complicated than that. It's one of those things that when you see it, people who see it done for the first time almost never realize what's actually going on for the graphic facilitator, because it looks like a lot of drawing. And people think, oh, you have to be really good at drawing, or you have to, be able to stand up there in front of draw in front of a lot of people. But this is where it's more complicated than that comes in, because really it's a lot more complicated than that. It's about listening. It's about helping a group through tough discussions. It's about figuring out what to do next with the group, and plus the writing, and plus some drawing, and all that's going on all at the same time. So yeah, it's more complicated than that. I don't know if I lost audio or if nobody's talking.
Oh, let's take you back to the Horizon Report, way back to when you were younger.
Okay.
2009. So when you think of the Horizon Report, how does that connect with where things are going and what's happening with technology and with graphic recording, and kind of how is that? You were a big part of that. Tell us a little bit about the Horizon. I love that. I'm fascinated by it. I love that. And then when I met you, I was like, when you were part of that, I was like, wow.
I remember you were one of the people that said to me, have you ever heard of this thing called the Horizon Report? It's like, yeah, I've heard of it.
And when you told me, I was like, you got to be kidding.
Yeah.
And actually, I wasn't surprised in the end. So,
So for those who don't know, the Horizon Report is an annual series of reports that's put out by an organization called the New Media Consortium, or NMC. And I worked for NMC for 6 years. And during that time, I was the lead author on the Horizon Reports. And the object of the Horizon Report is to take a look at emerging technology for initially for higher education, and identify 6 technologies that were going to have a big impact on higher education over 3 time horizons: the near term, which was 1 year or less; the midterm, which was 2 to 3 years; or the far term, which was 4 to 5 years. And this is funny. This is a speech that I haven't given in 4 years, and it just rolls off the tongue still.
yeah.
And the neat thing about the Horizon Report for me is that I got to pick the brains of all these really smart people who had their fingers out there and looking at different things, and I got to do research myself. I got to explore all kinds of bizarre technologies that at the time the connection between those technologies and education was sometimes very hard to see, and some of them are pretty standard now, pretty central. You know, I remember one of the last ones I did, we talked about 3D printing as way out there on the 4 to 5 year horizon. A lot of people hadn't heard of 3D printing, and how could that be useful in education? You know, it obviously had other uses for physics and mechanical engineering and things like that, but education. And now my son's high school has 3 3D printers, and it's a tiny little high school. They're just, you know, they're everywhere. So
I know, it's amazing. And when I brought that up in a faculty meeting, they looked at me like I had 3 eyes and horns growing out of my head.
I know.
I was like, it's coming. And I told them, and I said, this is really important. They go, what the heck does that have to do with learning?
Right.
What are we college of business? Yeah, you know?
Yeah. And yet there it is. So that was the Horizon Report. And that was just one of the topics that we covered.
Yeah, and when we look at the trends and challenges picture here with 2010, 2015, where do children fit into this for you?
Wow. So give me a little more context. You mean with graphics?
I look at the trends and challenges, and I look at this child that's a part of this report.
Yeah.
And she's looking off into the future, and I got to imagine that there's some significance, maybe some important significance to the notion of a child.
Well, sure. The Horizon Reports were always about education, and this picture was the cover of the 2010 Museum Edition, as it says there. And the idea is that these things that are so far off for us and so out there and so bizarre are going to be part of her everyday life, and it's going to be just, you know, stuff that she grows up with, and that changes people. It's if you talk to somebody who in their lifetime air travel was invented, you know, there aren't that many people that you can talk to that's true anymore, but or the car or anything like that. People who in their lifetime went from a period of not having it through it was introduced and grew in popularity and then it's everywhere. The people at the two ends of that spectrum are profoundly different in their outlook. And that's part of what the Horizon Report is about, is that she's going to be profoundly different in her outlook than you and me because of the things that were invented during our adulthood, but that for her will always have existed.
And I kind of think of you as a warrior for these kids and for learning and for our world.
Well, thank you. I take that as a compliment.
Yes, and Sitting Bull said, warriors are not what you think of as warriors. The warrior is not someone who fights because no one has the right to take another life. The warrior for us is one who sacrifices herself for the good of others. Her task is to take care of the elderly, the defenseless, those who cannot provide for themselves, and above all, the children, the future of humanity.
Well, now I'm incredibly honored.
And so there's this looking to the future as a child and preparing things and thinking where children are going to be, you're also defending something. You're also taking care of something. You know, when I think of how you got started in this and what you see your role as in this, how do you see your role in that future for the child? What are you doing for that?
You know, one of the things that I'm doing now, and this is sort of, there are a lot of things that I'm interested in, a lot of things I enjoy doing, but there's one thing that I think of as my mission. You know, this is why I'm on the planet. This is my personal mission on this planet, and that is to help unlock a door that got locked in almost every person at some point when they drew something and someone like a parent or a teacher or an older sibling or someone they really respected, that person said, that doesn't look right. And in almost every case, a door gets locked at that moment and people start changing their inner dialogue and they start saying, I can't draw. And I'm sure that that's happened for a lot of you who are around the fireplace here with us. And so my mission is to help reach in and unlock that door. And the younger you can do that, the better. So part of what I really, really believe in and really want to do is help faculty and teachers and parents and grown-ups understand that it's okay for kids to draw during class. It's okay for kids to take notes using visual imagery. It's okay to organize your thoughts visually, and in fact, for some kids, it's incredibly powerful, and that it doesn't matter if that's not what it looks like. It matters if that's what it feels like and if that's what reminds you of what you were hearing. And that's the heart of graphic facilitation, and that's really what I see as part of my role of what I can do to defend and protect and enable a better world for children is to let them take notes this way.
Hi, this is Becky. Rachel, I just wanted to say thank you so much. It's almost an emotional topic for me. I recently was listening to Brene Brown talk about shame.
Yeah.
And she labeled it art scar. And that's how I think of it and what happened to me when I was younger. So thank you for bringing that up and having that mission in life.
I am sorry that happened to you. That should not happen to anybody.
I agree.
Yeah.
And Rebecca, tell us a little bit about you and how you're reflecting on our conversation, and maybe something that will you be able to share some of your thoughts as we go through this?
Well, I'll try as they seem pertinent, and this one it really felt pertinent. I'll just tell you the story. I was in 6th grade and I was painting Easter eggs, and for some reason I chose brown and orange to paint my Easter egg, and my 6th grade teacher came up by my desk and she took that egg right off my desk and she looked at it, and in a really loud voice she put it down and she said, "That's not colors for Easter eggs, those are colors for Halloween."
She did not.
She did.
Oh.
And, you know, I have art in my family throughout my grandparents and my family, and from that point on I stopped drawing.
Oh.
And I picked it up in about 2006, as I told you on the phone, Rachel, thanks partly to the Grove. So, you know, I think that your mission to help children from a very young age continue to express themselves without the judgment and without the, you know, what's right and wrong is just super important. There's just so much we have to overcome when we start out with that load of crap.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story.
Anyway, I'm sure it's happened to many people, like you said.
Yeah, and my other mission, which is, you know, tied to that, is I would love to walk up to every teacher who's ever said that and flick them in the forehead with my finger, but that's a little harder.
That's gentle, correct?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not a very violent person, but I feel like I need to make a gesture.
Yeah.
Well, you got the spirit of Sitting Bull with you right now.
Right, right.
So, Steve, the other thing I will add is that, you know, getting into graphic facilitation at a later point in my career, I was I was very, very glad that I had facilitation down. I'd been facilitating for a couple of decades. And so I felt that I had, a big leg up on the whole process, but it's still very hard to overcome the messages that say, oh, that box isn't straight, or, that picture doesn't really look like a cow, or my people still don't look very good. And so just the process of letting go of all the internal judgment and practicing and just trying again and again, I have found to be really important.
Here's a secret that people don't realize, but if you ask any graphic recorder, any graphic facilitator, they will tell you this is true. Every single one of us, when we complete a chart, we look at it and we say, wow, I wish I'd done that differently. Some part of it, I wish I had done that differently. That did not come out the way I intended. Yeah. And that dialogue never goes away. And the trick is to reinterpret that message for yourself so that it's not, wow, that really was terrible and I hate it. But the message instead is, okay, that's interesting. I wonder what would happen if next time I tried this instead. And that's really the difference between the self-defeating internal dialogue and the one that helps you learn and grow. But you ask any graphic recorder, and they will tell you, graphic facilitator, and they will tell you, yeah, I look at my chart and I say, wow, I wish I'd done that one thing differently.
Yeah. And the other thing I will say for those people who are newer to it, whatever you do, most of the people in the room are going to think it's awesome.
It's true.
So, that has been very helpful to me as I've gone along, is just realizing that I'm my worst critic and most people aren't daring to even use more colors with their writing. So
yeah, that's true.
That's great. And so the graphic that you've created on unlocking the power of the narrative.
Yeah.
Share with us a little bit about that might relate to what is graphic recording or graphic facilitation, and how that can help someone.
Sure. So this one is actually an interesting example. It was recorded over the course of a whole day. It was recorded on my iPad. And technically, it's neither graphic recording nor graphic facilitation. It's visual note-taking. Because I did this taking notes during a full-day workshop that I attended. And the things on the left, the top half of the left, was the introduction to the workshop. And then the list of 6 things on the right are the 6 things that we covered in the workshop. And so those are my notes for each of those things. And then I went back to the very bottom of the left side to finish it up, with the building a narrative for communications as a field. And when I look at this, I can see the room, I can see the table, I can see the people who were seated across from me and next to me, I can see the materials and the speakers. It's like I'm right there again, because so much of your senses are invested when you're doing something like this that it's a whole memory altogether. It's not separate from it. And that's one of the really powerful things about, even if you're not doing it up in front of the room, do it in your notebook. And the thing I tell people who want to try this but who are afraid to try it is take your notebook and turn it 90 degrees so you're holding it in a landscape format instead of a portrait format, and see what that does for you, because that'll really change the way you take notes just from the shape of the paper being different.
Very cool. And when we look at Carl Rogers, he has an interesting quote here about listening. And he talks when someone really hears you without passing judgment on you, without trying to take responsibility for you, without trying to mold you, it feels damn good.
Yeah. He's right.
How do you take that narrative? How do you take and translate something? It's going through your lens. How do you manage that?
This is a big topic in the field right now, is sort of interpretation versus reflection. And there are many, many different ways to practice the many different techniques that are under the umbrella of the field of visual practice. And they're all useful in different situations. But the one that's related to this quote, and the one that the way that I usually practice graphic facilitation, graphic recording, is it's all about this. It's all about hearing people without passing judgment, taking responsibility, molding them, changing their words, making it quote unquote better. It's all about that. So if I'm in a room doing graphic recording or graphic facilitation and someone says something, I'll write down what they said. I don't write down every single word because people put a lot of words in sentences that, you don't need all of those words to remember what they said. But I record the keywords, and the words that I do record are words that were spoken. They're exactly words that were spoken. I don't paraphrase. I don't interpret. I don't change the wording in any way. I write down the keywords that I heard. And it completely changes a meeting in a couple of really, really subtle and really powerful ways. And one of them is that the trust that builds up between the group and me is huge because they know that I'm listening to them. They can clearly see that I'm hearing them. So while I'm writing down what someone is saying, I'm taking care that my body is not blocking their view of what I'm writing. So I'm not secretly writing it behind my back, behind them where they can't see it. I'm writing it in full view of them. They know they can correct me if I get it wrong. And my goal is to write down exactly what they said. So the one thing is that trust that builds up. And as a facilitator, that's so important for the group to trust you and to trust your process. And graphic facilitation really helps to build that. And then the other way that it changes the meeting is if you've ever been in a meeting with somebody who seems to be saying the same thing over and over and over and over, and no matter what, they say their piece, somebody else says something, and this person says the same thing that they just said, and somebody else says something, and then the first person says exactly the same thing again. The reason that happens is they don't feel heard. They don't feel that anyone is responding to them in a way that they understand as a response to what they said. So imagine instead that first person says something, and I say, and I write it down exactly what they said, and they can see it there. Well, great. They can let go of it. It's up there. Nobody's going to forget it. Nobody's going to pass it by. If they want someone to engage with it and it's not being engaged with, then they can approach it differently and say, well, let's talk about this, and they point to their words. So it changes the meeting because that person doesn't repeat the same thing over and over again, but that person can get to the next step, which is, I want someone to engage with me, which is what they're trying to say when they're repeating, but they don't have the words for it sometimes.
Becky, you want to add anything?
Right on. I couldn't have said it better myself. Right on.
John, go ahead, Becky. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say I've been involved in and trained some facilitators and had many people that I've co-facilitated with, and Rachel said the very first thing I always start with is do not interpret, do not pick a different word, write what they said.
Yeah. If you pick a different word, it sends a subtle signal that they're doing it wrong. Not
so subtle, yeah. No, it's rule number one, and maybe that's why I'm seen as a good facilitator. I don't know. There's so many parts of facilitation, but I think starting with write down what they said is the most important. So thank you, Rachel.
Yeah.
So here's one thing I'd love to add on, a layer on that. I'd love to get your reaction to this, and this is in mediation and working with fractioned groups or people who are debating and deliberating an idea that they can't quite agree on.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're capturing that debate, if your job is also possibly, or if you're seeing this, where you got a mediator, and I wonder if it's a mediator who's mediating and you're listening, and so you're capturing this technique, or if it would fit as you're capturing, do you sometimes mediate through your visual recording or graphic recording? And let me give you an example. Two groups are arguing over something about what to do with kids in the classroom, let's say, and they're both arguing over a particular pedagogical approach. And one group is saying we got to do it this way, and they're saying no, you're crazy and you're outdated in what you're trying to do. That doesn't make sense. The other group is saying, you know, blah blah, and they're going back and forth, and actually, you know, the mediator sitting there trying to help the group maybe come to agreement on what's the appropriate technology or what's the appropriate pedagogical approach. And as they're doing it, the person might pause and say, what you both say is that you both are saying that you care to ensure that the children get the best learning experience possible. And they both go, yes, in that moment. So it's a reframing at a higher level of abstraction between two kind of counter thoughts. How would you, what are your thoughts on how to handle that, and what role does a graphic facilitator play or a recorder play in that? And can they be directly involved in that, or do they need a third person to be facilitating that while you're capturing that?
Sure, that's a great question. Let me clarify for a second the difference between graphic facilitator and graphic recorder as I'm using those terms, because it comes into play here. So in my practice, if I'm graphic recording, that means that someone else is facilitating or mediating the group, and my job is to do the visual capture. So my interactions with the group are much more limited, not in a strict way. It's just my job is not to guide the process. My job is to do the visual capture. So in that case, in your scenario, what I would be doing is writing down the different things that each side said, but I would also write down what the mediator says, because to me that's part of the meeting, that's part of the whole thing. So so that's how I would handle that as a graphic recorder. And the way that if the mediator and I have a good working relationship, the way that the mediator can work with me as the graphic recorder is to walk over to the chart, point to different things that people have said, and say, well, on this side, these three things are very like these three things on this side. Can we build on that similarity? So the chart, by externalizing the conversation and by capturing those differing points of view so that they can all be considered at once, the chart becomes a tool that the mediator can use to help reach that agreement. So that's the first scenario. Then the second one has to do with graphic facilitation as opposed to graphic recording. So in my mind, when I'm graphic facilitating, I'm leading the process, I'm working with the group, I would be, in that case, mediating that conversation. And yes, that's absolutely something that, as a graphic facilitator, if I'm in that situation with that group, I would do that. That's part of my role as the facilitator, graphic or not. And in that case, it's very similar, where I record both of the opposing viewpoints, and I might have the two different groups each take a flip chart and some markers and prepare a poster that would advocate their position and then explain it. I might have them come up and look at the board together, and we all stand around it, and I say, well, tell me where you see the similarities. So I might use techniques that get the group to notice the best parts or the similarities of each other's positions. Another thing you can do is make sure that each side understands the other side, and then each side prepares a poster advocating the other side's position so that they're forced to see the good parts of it. If I were going to use a statement like the one that you said for the mediator, that would be fine too, but what I do there is I step away from the board and I say, so let me take a moment and pause and just reflect back a little bit of what I'm hearing. I might refer to the chart and say, this side said, this, this, and this, and this side said this, this, and this. And what's becoming clear to me, and tell me if I'm right on this, is that both of you really care deeply about the children's experience and you want it to be really good. Is that right? So if I'm bringing something new, I'm going to say, where did I get this idea? And then present it to them as something that they can accept or reject, because it's still their work. And my job maybe is to help them see a different view of it, but my job, as I see it, is not to come in and say, this is right, this is wrong, this is what you're saying.
Rachel, I think that's great. I love the way you're describing your different techniques in the midst of facilitation. I wonder what you would say about graphic images, pictorial images that come to your mind in a situation like that, and do you ever use those to help a group see where there's overlap?
I would, in the sense of, and again, it's different in every situation.
I know.
But but a diagram maybe, or something that shows overlap, and I'm thinking a Venn diagram would be a very simple way to show overlapping points of view. So something like that, where I can help them see the shape of the conversation in a geometric way, definitely. I would want to be careful about interpreting it as an image, as a representational image. For example, if I drew an elephant and said, well, your conversation's like an elephant, that's a pretty big leap. That's something that's in my head, and I'm putting it on their meeting. If someone in the room said, this is kind of like an elephant, that's different. Mm-hmm. But if it's coming from me, I'm going to be really careful, and I'm going to offer it. And that line about stepping away from the board, I'm very serious about that. You need to, if you're going to offer something to the group, you can't just draw it or write it as you're saying it, because then you're contaminating the board. That's a strong word, but it's their words, it's their work. So I literally move away from the board, talk to them, and then move back to record what they say about it, and separate those two roles of offering and receiving.
Mm-hmm.
And you're using space to signify that to the group. In terms of stepping away, you're saying, I'm kind of stepping out of that space. That's your space there by the board. I'm stepping out, and this is me, just checking in with you.
Right. And I'll use, I'll verbally say it too. I mean, I want it to be very, very clear.
Right, gotcha. What about censorship? What about situations when people are throwing things out that are inflammatory, hurtful, and maybe inappropriate? And even as a joke that's inappropriate, or it doesn't have to be anger festered. It can be, it can be something else.
There's a really useful phrase which is deceptively simple, and it is, do you want me to record that? and I'm totally serious. Yeah. Because as soon as you say that, people stop and they think, why would she ask that question? And they think back about what was just said, and then they say, oh, let me rephrase that, or we've gotten off topic here, or or sometimes, yeah, you should record that. That's part of the conversation. And again, it's their choice. Sometimes,
right, go ahead.
Sometimes people will change their minds. They'll come up afterward and they'll say, we really want to share this chart with the whole company, and this line here is really private to our group, and we can't have that on the chart. Can you remove that? And if it's a group agreement, then yeah, I'll take it off. I'll cover it with a label or erase it in the image or whatever, But you want to be careful about altering the chart when it's not a group decision, and when people can't see you doing it. That's tricky. You want to be careful about that.
When you're facilitating, when you're doing graphic facilitation, so you're managing the process and you're recording, do you also, to what extent do you attempt to record everything you say?
Most of what I say doesn't need to be recorded. Okay. Because most of what I say is either directing the group about the process, and I don't need to write that down, or it's asking clarifying questions, and I don't need to write those down. So if I were going to record something that I say, it would be in that situation where I step away from the board and I say, hey, I wanted to make a suggestion. Tell me what you think of it. And I'll suggest it. And then when they talk about it, I'll say, would you like me to record that? And then I will if they want me to. So that's pretty much how my words get on the board. But otherwise, it's not about me. It's not about me.
Right.
So as we think about you and the people that have influenced you, let's one big influence on your life is David.
That's right. These are great pictures. So that's David Civet in the middle, in the top picture. Obviously, I'm the one on the right, and then Marianne Lesaget is on the left. And the three of us did a workshop together. We facilitated or hosted a track actually at UViz conference last summer in Berlin, and this was our track debrief. And it had been a very grueling day, and it was quite hot in Berlin that summer. And so you see me there sitting, we're sitting next to a river, and I'm enjoying my my post-workshop beer.
Apple cider.
Right, sure, apple cider. It was really good apple cider. The Germans make really good apple cider. And David, you know, and Miriam too. I'm glad that it's this picture that you have here, because Miriam's work is amazing. But David was my first exposure to graphic facilitation, was seeing David do it. And it was just, it blew my mind, because he walks in, he slaps this, you know, 4-foot by 8-foot piece of paper on the boards, and then he starts writing down everything that people are saying and drawing images and organizing it visually. And I look up at what he's doing, and I look down at my little notebook where I'm basically doing the same thing, only tinier and not as well. And I look back up at what he's doing, and I'm just like, I can't believe I never thought of that, is one thing I'm thinking. And the other one is, that's it. That's it. That's what I need to be doing, is that. And so in a very real way, it was David that got me started in this, seeing him do it. And it's just, it's amazing. I mean, I'm speechless. I'm still, every time I watch him work, I'm still astonished. It's just this other level of competence that just floors me every time I see him.
The Beatles. It's like watching the Beatles.
It's yeah.
How about Lisa? Tell us a little bit about Lisa.
So Lisa Aurora is pictured in the bottom picture there next to me, and Lisa and I met. Wow, I don't even know, 4, 5, 6 years ago, because we were co-teaching the Graphic Recording 101 workshop that was offered at the IFVP conference. And we applied along with a bunch of other people. The two of us were selected. We'd never met. And so we were, and she lives in Canada, so we remotely organized this workshop. We used the agenda that had been developed already in previous years, and decided, you know, how we were going to tweak it and what supplies we were going to use, and we coordinated the whole thing. And then we got on site, and we just hit it off. Like, it was great. She's a wonderful, wonderful partner and colleague, someone to work with, just great. And she is one of the most gifted graphic recorders I have ever seen. She's also a facilitator, graphic facilitator, but her graphic recording is just out of this world. I wish I knew how she did it. You know, I wish I could do like a mind meld. I love her work. And she has really good resources. For those of you out there who are graphic facilitators, graphic recorders, she has a couple of really good ebooks that she's just written. One of them is on gallery walks. And I have to say that after reading it, my gallery walks became much more impactful. So this is when you have the group walk past all the charts that have been completed, reflect on them, and then proceed with, you know, whatever they have to do next. And she wrote the book on gallery walks. And then she wrote another one on the partnership, or as she calls it, the dance, between a graphic recorder and a facilitator when they work together. And if you are in that situation, either as a facilitator who wants to work with a graphic recorder or vice versa, I really strongly recommend her book. It's very clear. It's spot on.
What's her last name?
Aurora, A-R-O-R-A. Lisa Aurora. Yeah. And she inspires me. I love to sneak pictures of her work on my phone so that when I'm working I can pull them up and kind of copy what she's done.
Do you mean that's okay? Because I do it a lot.
Yeah, we all do it. Yeah, we have a rule called CASE, copy and share everything.
Oh, cool. I think you should say a little bit more about that for all the people on the webinar.
Sure. You can't take a picture of someone else's work and publish it and call it your own. That's still a no-no. Even with graphic recording, that's a no-no. But if you see something that someone has done that inspires you or that you like, or it's a technique you want to try, take a picture of it. If you have an opportunity, ask them to show you how they did it. They'll be happy to. Mm-hmm. And then practice it on your own. It's totally okay. Mm-hmm. We all learn from each other.
Yeah, star people started somewhere.
Yeah, possibly with David, but possibly not.
Because I love the star person.
The star person is good.
So I got a question for you.
Sure.
Can you give a rule of thumb and 4 principles for when to use pictures versus words. I'm kidding. So Bob Horn.
Awesome, because that's exactly what I was going to say. and you know what? I don't use pictures versus words. I use pictures and words. You can't record exactly what someone said if you're drawing a picture. It's not exactly what they said because they had to say it in words.
Right. And Bob Horn, tell us a little bit about how his work has influenced you.
Bob Horn, I think he knows everything there is to know about visual language. And that was something that after I got started with graphic facilitation and introduced to this concept that, how it works in meetings and how you can capture the conversation that way, I got really interested in visual language, and I also got interested in that question of, do you use pictures, do you use words, how do you balance it? And Bob Horn's book, Visual Language, which was written quite some time ago, but which is still really spot on, is a great resource as you're trying to figure that out for yourself and you're trying to figure out how do people understand visual language and what can I do that will be universally recognized as opposed to not. And he's just a great person to talk to. He's fascinating to talk to.
And let's talk about Mom.
My mom?
Your mom, you as mom,
Me as mom.
and the role of mom, and the influence and inspiration of mom.
My poor mother. When I was growing up, when I was a little kid, I used to draw all the time. I drew ponies. I drew a lot of ponies. I was big into ponies, but I drew all kinds of things. And my mom would look at me and she'd say, "Honey, don't be an artist. Artists, you won't have enough money. You'll starve. Don't be an artist." And when I was really tiny, I don't remember this, but I've been told this. She actually trained me to answer the question, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" by saying a banker, which I guess was, going to make me wealthy. So that was what she wanted, was for me to be a banker. And poor mom, I kind of grew up to be an artist, but I'm doing okay anyway, so I think it's all right. But my mom
kind of grew up
to be an artist. Well, there's a fair mix of technology and teaching and other stuff in there too. So, and really, I'm not an artist. I do some art. I do quilting, I do painting, I do drawing, but I am not an artist. And it's really important to understand that you don't have to be an artist to do the kind of work that I do. You really don't. But I'm not an artist. I wouldn't call myself that. But my mom actually paints oils, although she hasn't in a long time. But when I was little, she was always in the studio painting oil pictures, and she loved to paint birds on flowering tree branches, and she would paint these delicate little birds and these delicate little flowers. And that was inspiring to me to know that, she was a librarian. She had a whole different job. But to know that art could exist along with whatever else you had to do in life, I think was a big thing for me. And my mom showed me that.
I take issue with you not allowing yourself to be an artist.
Well, you're welcome to, but it's a call I get to
in the sense, I guess, so you have a narrow definition of artist, because I think when you go back to Bob Horn's comment, words versus pictures, and he says no. When you think of integrating all of that and bringing to life what someone is saying or what a group is saying, and then you think of all the different elements associated that get brought together, there is an art to that, and that expression touches people in certain ways. So in my mind, I think that's how I think of art. So that's the only reason I take issue with that, is because I do think of you as, an artist in your own genre of art.
Okay, then I'll amend my earlier statement. I'm not a fine artist.
Right, and I think that's what you mean, because it really is. I mean, Becky, when you think of Rachel's work, when you just think of the work in terms of art, what does it say to you?
Well, it's very artistic. It's very artful. I can understand why she's saying she isn't an artist, but your work is so artistic, and it takes so much to do it at the level you're doing it. That's, I'm suspecting, why Steve is saying, yes, you are an artist at what you do. I want to take...
I'll take it to the next level, and I'll say you might not be a fine artist, but you're a fine artist.
Right.
Thank you.
I want to ask. Yeah. We're going to run out of time. I want to ask a question that I think is going to be really interesting to other people on the line about who are, just starting or practicing their graphic recording. How do you know, or tell us a little bit about when you put pictures and color and the extras in? So, you're working on getting the words down, but I'm guessing that your final chart has more in it than you were recording at the time that the conversation was happening. Can you talk about when you add the bells and whistles?
So when I'm doing graphic facilitation, I don't, because I'm leading the group through the process, which means that when it's time to move on, it's time to move on. So in fact, all of the examples that you're seeing are either visual notes, my visual notes, or graphic recording when someone else is responsible for the process. And and my charts look very different. If I'm doing graphic recording versus graphic facilitation, my charts look very different. So this one about the Mount Tam watersheds, this was a graphic recording, but this is more like what it looks like when I do graphic facilitation. So very few images. The one that you see up there in the corner was done before the meeting even started. So that was set up. I did that, and I did the agenda, and then I started recording these other things. And there are very few images in here. There's little half people, and that's it. And I do those as I go. And all the different colors and things that you see here, I did that as I went, because you don't have time to. The meeting's not going to wait while you fiddle with your chart.
Right.
Yeah. So if I'm just doing graphic recording, and I use the word just not because it's less, but because it's one job instead of two jobs. So if I'm doing graphic recording and not graphic facilitation, I will have more time to worry about how things look, to play with the chart, make it fancy, whatever. If I'm doing graphic facilitation, the only opportunity I have to do that is when the group is engaged in small group work that I don't have to be there, I don't have to be over their shoulder all the time. So I'll walk around and check in with them, but in between that, I can be kind of polishing up the charts. But I do very, very little of it after the fact. Almost everything is done as I'm going, because I don't have that kind of time. I don't want to be there all night, Yeah,
necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how the world of World of Warcraft. Tell us a little bit about how that is a part of your work and what you do.
Well, World of Warcraft is definitely a part of my life. This is a particularly gloomy picture, by the way. The most of the world is very beautiful and not filled with demons and skeletons. But anyway, I've been playing World of Warcraft for 10 years, almost since it started. I joined, about a month after initial launch, and I've been a constant subscriber and player ever since, and my family plays. And one of the things that it does for me is when I travel, it lets me connect with my family, and we can do something together no matter where I am, because we can all log in and do things together. So I love that. And so one of the most wonderful things about my work right now is that Blizzard, which is the company that makes World of Warcraft, is a client of mine. And they called the Grove, 4 years ago or so, and were interested in a strategy session, and I jumped right on that one. We kind of have a little system among the consultants for divvying up the work, and I was like, nope, that one's mine. And they are one of my favorite clients because they're so much fun to work with. I think that on their side, I think it's really fun for them to work with a consultant who gets what they do and who actually uses their product, because I don't get the sense that that happens a lot. And a lot of video game companies have a really bad reputation for chewing through their talent, for hiring young people and working them to death for 3 years, and then, you know, they burn out and they get a new crop and do the same thing. And Blizzard is really not like that. The people that I met at Blizzard are so excited to be there, and they really care about the employees, and they really care about making work fun and engaging and not overwhelming. And I love that that a game as wonderful as World of Warcraft comes out of a company as fun as Blizzard. And World of Warcraft is, I mean, it's amazing. 10 years in internet time is a millennium. It's astounding that this game is still around and still has more than 7 million subscribers. It's just amazing. And it's great. I love it. I love playing it.
That's really, really neat. And tell us a little bit about Doug Engelbart's influence on your work.
Doug. So Doug was a wonderful man. He was instrumental in inventing the mouse and changing the way we interact with computers. And I met him first through NMC, and then later through a job with Institute for the Future. And I don't know if he would say he was visual, but he definitely was. And he looked at a computer and saw a whole other way to interact with it, which led to everything that you're seeing right now on your screen. I mean, you know, the mouse, the point-and-click interface, graphical user interfaces, all of that came out of his work in some way. And one of my favorite stories was at a party with Doug Engelbart, and I was standing talking to him and a couple other people, and this was maybe 6-7 years ago, and I had my hair up in a ponytail, and someone behind me called my name, and so I turned to see who was talking to me, and while my back was turned, somebody yanked my ponytail. And so I spun back around, and Doug is standing there with this expression of innocence on his face, like just, he might have been thinking about his mother, you know, there's just total innocence. And the other two guys were both standing there looking like they couldn't believe that something had just happened. And so that was the day Doug Engelbart pulled my ponytail. And it was just, I mean, and that was just such a, the idea that somebody who did everything that he could do could be still that playful and that, you know, engaged with life, and just totally, he saw the ponytail, he yanked it. It was like, it was amazing.
And that goes, I think, also at why did he stay and keep doing what he did in his career? Which goes to this quote: people don't leave because things are hard. They leave because it's no longer worth it.
Yeah. But
you stay. He stayed. Why do you stay doing what you do?
I love it. I have never done anything I loved more. I love the moment at the end of the day when the group looks around at the walls and they look at all the work that they did that's clear, it's written up there, they can see it, and they say, we had no idea we could do that much work in a day. I love the moment when they have a breakthrough, that they've been struggling with some issue for 90 minutes and suddenly they get through it and they get it and they fix it and they move on. And I love what I do. I love how it helps make meetings better, because, you know, a lot of meetings, frankly, kind of suck, and it makes them better, and I love it.
Rachel, do you can you talk for a minute about the space needs that go along with graphic recording?
Sure. You need a good sized space. Part of the impact of it is because it's so big. So we ask for an 8 to 10 foot long section of wall that's free of all obstructions, outlets, molding, pictures, any of that. And then we put up a sheet of paper that's 4 feet tall by 8 feet long. If that's not available, we'll bring in a foam board of the same size and mount it on 2 easels. So you need a long space, but you also need a kind of a deep space because you have to move back and forth a lot. So you need maybe 3 to 5 feet in front of your paper that's unobstructed. I remember a session once where I had set up, they had a beautiful wall. I'd set up my paper on the wall. I was graphic recording. I wasn't facilitating. And I was ready to go, and so I dashed out to get a bottle of water or something. I came back in, and 3 latecomers to the meeting had walked over and set their bags down right in front of my wall, and they were literally leaning against the paper and preparing to watch the meeting, you know, right there. And I was just like, do you not see the giant paper, the table with the markers? You know, it's just not obvious to you. So it sometimes helps to put tape on the floor. I've actually had to do that in some meetings where people kept encroaching into my space with their chairs. I put tape on the floor, like to tape out a box where I could move. Otherwise, you'll trip over people.
Thank you.
Mm.
So this next image really kind of connects with this thought, connects with that you love the work that you do, and there's the very practical, technical nature of it, and it's how that practical, technical nature of it connects with the people that really helps to define them or helps them define themselves. And you also, the other piece here is you've mentioned a lot, and it comes out in your focus on serving others. And those 2 things, I think, connect to this stories that we asked you to kind of think about as we were getting ready for this, and think about some stories. I'm wondering if you'd pick one. You had 3. You have hate, camels, and tears. and so as you think about this, you love things that make you you. You're a warrior in service of others and protecting others in this art and nature. Which of these stories jumps out at you that you'd like to share with us today?
You know, in the context of my mission on Earth and serving others, the tears story is definitely the one that that comes forward for me. And that one was I was giving a talk at a high school about visual note-taking, and how when I was in school I got in trouble for drawing during class, and really what I was doing was doodling so that I would remember better, because if I sit still and listen, it's very hard for me to retain what I've heard. If my hands aren't doing something, it's almost impossible for me to sit and listen. And so I would doodle, and I would just fill the page with geometric designs. But the thing is, and I didn't make this connection at the time. I didn't make it till much later in my life. But I could look at that page of geometric designs and point to any piece of it and tell you what I had heard when I was drawing that particular part of the page. Even though there were no words on it, even though there was nothing there, it was the kinesthetic act of drawing and listening at the same time. It connected that visual image with those words in my mind, and I could repeat back what I'd heard. But my teachers didn't know that, and I couldn't articulate it, and so I would get in trouble for drawing in class. So I was giving this talk about how to do visual note-taking, and I shared that story, and I said, you know, teachers in the audience, students in the audience, I want you to know this is a legit way to take notes. This is something that for many people will actually help cement the learning for them, and if you can tap into that, that's great. And before you yell at someone for drawing in class, try to find out if this is what's going on first. And a student came up to me after the talk, and he was literally crying, and he said, thank you so much. I was in the same place as you, where I can't sit still and listen, and I would doodle and I would get in trouble, and I never understood why, and I didn't know how to stop. And you have just taught me something about myself that I did not know. And that is one of the things that I want to be here to do, is help people who are stuck like that.
And you do.
Thanks.
And then you can take a break sometime and be a girl, a toes in the sand girl.
Yeah, very soon, actually.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about where you'd love to be when you're going to take a little vacation. What would that look like?
Oh, just like your picture, pretty much. A beach and clear water and clear skies, and I love the shallower areas like the Caribbean. It's just it's where I was meant to be. I spent part of my youth in Belize and on Guam, and it's just that's the place that makes me feel like a child again. Makes me feel myself and comforted and most in touch with the planet is in places like that.
And that's important to informing and energizing and helping you do the good work.
Yeah, you have to be centered to be in service to the group. And you have to be in touch with yourself and take breaks and relax, which is something that is easy to say, but even for me is hard to do.
Yeah. So Becky, what are some of your reflections as we wrap up? You're on mute if you're talking.
I'm here. I was just typing into the Chatsy to see if there's any questions from the group. My reflection is I want to see David and Rachel and some other fantastic, really experienced graphic recorders in action. It would be so inspiring.
It's amazing to watch a really good practitioner. I love sitting and watching.
Where would you recommend people go, Rachel, if they want to go and sit in and be in a room full of rock stars? Where would you recommend they go?
The IFBP conference, which is coming up next month in Austin, and still has some seats, as I understand it.
Okay, and what's the link, the website link?
IFVP, which stands for International Forum of Visual Practitioners, ifvp.org.
Cool.
And you want
Don,
to
you were going to say something?
Packed with them.
Yeah, there's a couple. There's a not in the chat room itself, but in the questions to us in the control panel. There's a couple that I've already answered, and you've gotten a really good response, Rachel. But there's two from Cindy. One is about intuition when you're drawing. Do you listen to your intuition when you're drawing?
I'm listening to my intuition the whole time. It's a big part of facilitation as well. And often I listen to my intuition when drawing, and sometimes I have to tell my intuition that it needs to sit down and take a rest, because sometimes I'm inspired to draw something that I haven't practiced or that I don't have a really good picture of, and I know that that's going to lead me down a path where I'm going to be distracted and I'm going to miss things, and in that case I'll leave a space and I'll try to come back at a break and do the drawing then. But usually I do listen to my intuition. I guess that's my intuition also telling me not to do that at that moment. So yeah, I guess I do.
Cool. And that question was from Cindy, and Cindy actually is joining us from France.
Oh, nice.
And she's been very engaged in her questions and listening. So she really did take away a lot from your session. The second question that she had was, are there times where you think that you may have drawn differently if you were at a different moment in your work?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. I look back at things I did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and I think, wow, what was I thinking? And I also go through phases, or not phases, but periods where I'm working on one particular thing. So, so maybe I'm working on how to make clusters of information more clear, or maybe I've seen a particular style of lettering and I'm working on that. And so the charts will be reflective of that one thing. And actually, every time I do a facilitation, graphic facilitation or graphic recording, I try to bring in one thing that I want to work on during that meeting. But just one thing, because mostly I'm there to do the meeting. But it does make them look different from time to time. And there are times when I learn something, and I think if I'd only known that 6 months ago, it would have made a difference. So that continues your whole life. That just is going to keep going on.
Great, thanks.
So this has been awesome. Thanks, Rachel, and
Thank
thanks, Becky, and thanks, John. John, you want to chat a little bit, talk a little bit about next steps, and close us out here for today?
Yep, absolutely. So as you guys are seeing now on your screen, if you want to go into the questions tab or go if you're in the chat room, just give us a bumper sticker Gestalt checkout. So what are one or two key words that you're taking away from today's session? And we'll read those out towards the end. We'll do an online debrief on LinkedIn on Nexus for Change. Rachel, you don't have to be a part of that, but we're just going to pose some questions up there, and people can respond there.
Super.
As you guys close out, you'll be asked from GoToWebinar to fill out a Nexus webinar survey. Go ahead and click yes and respond to those questions just to give ourselves here at Nexus and then Rachel some feedback on her session.
Please.
And then my last slide is we have two webinars coming up. One is tomorrow. It's about dialogic organization development and their approach to transformational change for two authors that have a book coming out with that same title, Jervis Bush and Bob Marshak. So be sure to check that out. And then we have our next Fireside Chat, which is on the power of appreciative inquiry and the benefit of SOAR with Jacqueline Stavros next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Both of the links to those will be sent out to you guys after this session, and you can also go to nexusforchange.org, and the links will be there too for you to register. So I'm going to go ahead, and Becky, you can do this too, and read through some of the things in the chat room. So Cindy said, thank you, and thanks a lot for answering her question. Phil said, practice and accept what unfolds. Phil also said that Rachel and Grove are so supportive that you guys Skype into his university classes.
Oh, hi, Phil.
Appreciate that.
Roberta says, encouraging kids who doodle to continue to develop those skills. I say, pick up my doodling again.
Yep.
This is great.
And
So
Roberta
thank you.
said,
Yes,
oh, good.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Steve. I was going to say, Roberta also said holding a space for group dialogue.
Yeah.
Thanks, Roberta.
And this has been a great space around our virtual fireplace. So thanks, everybody. Rachel, thank you. We'll
Thank
do more
you.
of these. It's always fun to stroll around with you and get more connected with you. So
Well, I had a great time. Thank you so much for having me.
yeah, is there any takeaway you have for today?
I am just so delighted at all the interest in graphic facilitation, graphic recording. I think it's wonderful that the field's expanding, and I thank you all for your time for coming.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody, and bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.